Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Virtual Island Summit 2023. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kata Magyar, and I'm the Director of Events at Island Innovation, based in Valencia, Spain. I'm very happy to welcome you to this session titled Island Stories, the Power of Community Engagement for the Energy Transition, Samsø's Case Study. The island of Samsø serves as a remarkable case study of renewable energy development. Join us as Søren Hermansen delves into the challenges, solutions, and opportunities the island faces, and how the project being undertaken on this Danish island can be replicated across the world. But before we begin, you should see a poll will appear now on your screen. Please let us know where you are connecting from and the sector and the industry you belong to. As we are waiting for the poll up here, I invite you to use the chat function to introduce yourself and where you're joining from, and make any comments during the session. Please make sure that you use the Q&A function for your questions, which can be found separately below the screen. And we will do our best to make sure that we can address as many as possible. And now, please meet your moderator, Stefano Moncada, Director of the Islands and Small States Institute. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Kata. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone who's connected today. This is Stefano Moncada. I'm the Director of the Islands and Small States Institute of the University of Malta, where we are conducting teaching, research, and activities connected to and training connected to specifically islands and small state studies, especially in this area. And we offer especially postgraduate courses, master's, PhDs, with the interest of understanding, investigating, and championing issues in relation to islands and small states. So I'm very happy today to be talking about a very important issue that we are all facing, especially in relation to the stories that emerge from islands, and how we can learn not only from islanders but also from people who live in the larger states and mainland from such stories. So I'm very happy to moderate this session with Søren Hermansen, Director of the Samsø Energy Academy. The Samsø Energy Academy is a non-profit organization that facilitated the islands community driven energy transition to 100% renewable energy back in 2007. And currently they're supporting the municipality of Samsø to become completely energy independent from fossil fuels by 2030. So I would like to start, Søren, by you giving us a brief summary of what the project was originally and how it is evolving today, to give to our viewers and to the people who want to interact with us later on an idea of the story behind Samsø and why is it considered to be so successful. Thank you.
So thank you for having me in this session. I'm looking forward to elaborate a little bit on what happens on islands. And from my side on Samsø Island, we were a sorry little island in 1997 and 98 because we were kind of suffering from depopulation and aging population, and there was a lack of jobs. We had some big industries that closed down and merged with other companies and moved to the mainland, and therefore we were kind of left in kind of a depression. But at the same time, we had a minister, Mr. Svend Auken, the late Mr. Svend Auken. He was the Minister of the Environment. He went to Kyoto to the COP3 meeting, and there he promised that Denmark would kind of fulfill an ambition about showcasing that it was possible to change to 100% self-sufficient green energy or renewable energy. And for this, he sent out a competition to find that place. And Samsø, my island, we won the competition by addressing kind of a master plan where we indicated how we in 10 years would make that transformation by the use of wind power, bioenergy, solar energy, energy efficiency, all the technologies that was available in those days. And then 10 years later, we could sum it up and say, we actually did it. We became more than self-sufficient. We produced much more energy than we were consuming in total. I have to say we are grid connected, so we are exporting electricity from the island to the mainland to compensate for whatever CO2 emission we have from transportation and other things we can't change right now, but that we aim to do here also. So basically, I'm talking from a successful kind of top-down process that was initiated by the Danish government and part of the Kyoto or the UN agreements and deals that was made kind of over the many COP meetings that has happened since then. For us on Samsø, it was a different story. It was not just about the wind turbines and the district heating and the change from fossil fuel import to a locally green production of energy. It was much more like a capacity building effort where we tried to educate people to know what to do, to play a role in the transition, and also to invest in their own infrastructure, which is a driving force in Denmark. We have a lot of cooperative owned structures like wind power owned by people, not by companies, district heating systems owned by house owners. So we have a collective ownership model that is very, very useful when we talk about a green transition and changes. So I think partly you can say the success of Samsø is not just that we met the goal and the kilowatt hours and the numbers, but we also met like a growing optimistic attitude from people participating, and also like a much lesser resistance, or what somebody called NIMBY, or like a resistant conservative attitude to changes, which is very often the case in island communities, that we know what we have, but it's more complicated to understand what is coming and is it good or bad for me, or what can I get out of it. So in our mind, we kind of changed from NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, to what's in it for me. So the more pragmatic attitude to the what do I get out of it, and then try to pinpoint that and teach people that they can save money, they can be co-investing in the process, they can have a say in the democratic, what we call it, energy democracy process, where we decide how is the infrastructure going to look like in a few years. So I think that is kind of my introduction to you. We are, I mean, maybe numbers, we are a society of almost 4,000 people. We are an independent municipality. We have our own mayor's office and a steering committee here. So we have some self-governance, or own governance here. We are mainly farming, but tourism is growing. So I think this year, or maybe last year after COVID, the tourist economy has overgrown the farming economy. So we are kind of 50-50 farming and tourist destination.
Fantastic. Thank you for this introduction, Søren. I would like you to take us through your point of view, your experience on some of the possible challenges that you have faced, you and of course all the community that has moved this project forward, in relation to the characteristics of being an island, right? Of living in an island. So some of the challenges that many other islands and islanders might compare this to, because of course we know that issues such as remoteness, being cut off, relying on mostly transportation, either by ferries or by airplanes, you know, is of course sometimes an obstacle to make things happen, either faster or might also be more expensive. So what was your experience when facing these inherent obstacles that many islands have, and how were they overcome will be another question I have for you later on.
Yeah, I think what in the beginning we thought it was a technical project. I mean, I'm not a technician myself. I'm educated as a farmer. I have a short education at the university, so I'm not really an academic. I'm more like a practical person. So for me, it was like how to involve all the businesses on the island and make them see the potential of change. And energy efficiency was like for the house builders to put more insulation and make better houses and improve the standards so we could save energy. And for the plumbers and the electricians, it was about installing heat pumps and wind power and the other things here also. So people could see the opportunity of change in jobs and business and income instead of just paying for expensive oil from outside, which was like it was still rising price, like never-ending dependency on imported fuel from outside. So my job was to make people aware of the change, but not seen from a technical point of view, but seen from a very personal point of view. What's in it for me? What can I get out of this? And how can I be involved in the process? And for this, I learned quickly that it was not about inviting developers to come and do it for us, but make us able to do it ourselves as much as possible. So the ownership also comes with another thing. So we created something, I don't know if you can see it, maybe not because I'm blurred, but we have a guide, it's called Here, a guide for local pioneer community. So this guide includes a lot of things. It's called Here because it's about here. I could also bring it to Malta, to your island, and it would still be here. So what's at stake here? And in this, we have this saying here, I don't know, can you see this? Maybe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. A strong, sustainable and robust community must share locality, activity, and mentality. So I think the mental part of the process was more important than the practical part. How do you make people understand that this is good? How do you make them trust that what we do here is the right thing to do? So it's about a process before we go into action. So we have a saying that we try to say, we need to say, why do we do this project before how? So why before how sounds maybe a little bit philosophical, but very often when you launch a project, all the engineers and practitioners, they go straight into business and say to them, this is how we're going to do it. But the majority of people will not understand what is going on here because they are not informed and they haven't thought about all the solutions. So we spend quite a lot of time having meetings with different groups of citizens on the island to talk to them about what is your major problem in your area. So some places it could be lack of jobs, some places it could be lack of kids in the school, and there was a risk that the school would close and they had to bring their kids to another school and stuff like that. A lot of things that was very close to people's hearts. And then we could say, when we listed all these personal problems in local communities, we could go over in the how and then say, is there any solutions over here that could solve the questions that you have in your community? And that kind of gave people the mental feeling of, all right, I mean, this is making sense. Now I understand why we put up wind turbines and other things, because they are the source of what you call of money or resources that will help us solve all the other problems that we're struggling with every day. So, I mean, I have to say to you, it's not so much about the climate. It's not about the global risk here, but it's much more about the survival of the community as kind of in very practical and local terms. How do we solve the problems that we have right in front of us? And sustainable development is one of these solutions.
I mean, this is, of course, very inspiring. And we know, in fact, also from other success stories like yourself and your islands, that where we've been able to involve the communities and own the project from bottom up, building it together as a community, and accounting for also all the diversity that there is, because sometimes, you know, we have this ideal picture of communities as one solid thing. It's not. There are different interests, different values. However, what makes a sense of community is the respect and understanding that this can coexist together by, of course, proposing something that can work for everyone, right? To different degrees. So I think your story tells us that the involvement of communities was very important from the beginning. So although, and this is my next question, although you mentioned yourself, this was more of a top-down because it was the initiative of a national government and probably also regional and local governments to be involved and do something about the issues that the island was facing. There was, on the other hand, initiatives built by people like yourself who went together the how and the why, especially from the people on the ground, and this match together. So my question to you is this: how can these two reality coexist to eventually give the good results that your islands have. I'm going to explain it a bit better, and I close here my question. In many places, we also have good incentives and good movements from national governments to support islands that are experiencing the population or aging, but eventually the end result might not last more than few years out of the project, right? They do not last in a sustainable manner. So was there something that perhaps the two actors, in this case, the community and the government, have worked together to make it happen? Was there any experience that you want to share in this regard?
Yeah, I think you're right that we did a great effort in making the top-down work bottom-up. So the bottom-up approach was a process, and the process was, how do we call the different stakeholders in this and make them aware of their possibilities? We have to help them with the numbers. We have to help them with the possibility and the options for the future, because these are long-term investments. I mean, some of them are 20 years lifetime for a wind turbine, for example, and they're quite expensive. Like when we bought the turbines, they were like 1.5 to 2 million euros per turbine. So that was a lot of money that we had to gather. We have 11 onshore turbines, and we have much more expensive 10 offshore turbines. That was one of the biggest projects we ever made. But to build that courage in people to do that, to actually invest so much money in the process, was a very long process. And we had a lot of, I mean, I'm galvanized inside from all the coffee I drank at all the meetings I had to go to, because it is like building trust that this is possible and we can do it. Very often people don't trust themselves they can do it, because we meet a lot of very smart business people that'll come from outside and say, we can do it for you. We are developers and we are used to do this, and we have this as a main business. But the problem is that they come, they put up the project, and then they leave again, and they take the profit away from us. I mean, some of it, and it's also good, but it's another way of doing it. And it's not as good for the community as if you own it yourself. You don't have to be 100% owner, but you have to have feeling of ownership, like the mental feeling of ownership, and that you have like a long-term vision about what does it mean for the community to have these projects, that they are paying off every year. You can see the benefit, you can see what come out of it, and therefore we can build the next project on top of the first successful process. So it's kind of a learning process where every time we involve more people, we have more owners who are advocating the next project, because they can see, hey, that was good, the first project, it helped my business, it helped my own economy. So therefore, I trust the next project. And I think we built courage on top of that, because people learned that they could do much more than they believed they could in the beginning of the process. So trust and capacity building and experience is part of the equation here, where we try to teach people that they can actually do much more than they thought they could. And the other thing is, we also learned that there's a lot of things we don't know about. And then we learned that the network behind us is good to know. So we could always call some expert from outside, from academia, from legal entities, from the government, to come and help us do the process here, because we became famous. And therefore, the government thought that we were a nice showcase. So they actually offered extra consultancy and help and advice from Central Energy Agency in the government. But it was like a hand-in-hand process that if we hadn't been successful, they would, of course, not have helped us. So it was like, you help me and I help you. and therefore, we learned that if we're doing good, there'll be even better things coming to us. I mean, today we have changed the ferry. Also, we have a hybrid electric ferry, which is having 160 cars and 600 passengers. So that's a big ferry. And we're going to have the next ferry. It's already ordered and being built now as we speak, and it'll be launched 1st of January 2025. And I think this is interesting for all islands. It's going to be 180 cars and even more passengers. A very big ferry. And it's going to be charging about 3 megawatt hours per trip. So that's a lot of electricity you need to feed into that ferry. So that we need to learn a lot about how do we administrate that load and that whole capacity, so we can actually showcase in the world that this is possible. We can make sustainable ferry transportation, where this has been one of the big burdens of transportation, that the CO2 emission from heavy transportation is a big problem worldwide. And maybe now we can do this also. I mean, if we had said this 20 years ago, people would say, you are out of your mind. This is never going to happen, but it is happening now. And I think we are building on successes, and we are making people more competent and with more capacity.
What I am, first of all, thank you so much for sharing this. What I am, in a way, surprised, but on the other hand, also confirms what we hear and read about, the importance of doing things, looking at community involvement and supporting sustainable development, is that whenever we have a project like yours, which is successful, and there are many others, and I would say in islands even more, to claim success over overcoming obstacles and providing, sustainability for the islands, we see that the community involvement is very important. And when it is done properly, together, of course, with the authorities and following a process, which might be a bit lengthier, therefore a bit longer. However, if we stop looking at the short term of the profit that you can have from that investment that perhaps, in a much shorter period of time would give you better results, and we look at how the community can be involved and therefore be long-term sustainable, the results are like you're saying here. There are virtuous opportunities that arise, like all these activities that are fueled by the power of the community being involved, or other business opportunities that might arise because the project is intrinsically linked with the environment and it is virtuous. So there are many other investments that come in. So I think this is, the short versus the medium and long term, right? Sometimes we have to sacrifice the initial profit that we might see coming up very, very fast, and think that in the long term would be much better to invest in, in such activities. Which brings me to another question I have for you, Søren, which is about, the importance of activities like your academy. So was the idea of the Energy Academy within the first set of ideas you had when you started the project, or it evolved later because you understood the importance of education and to train and support the activities on the ground?
So, I mean, we had it in the sketches of the master plan that we would see if we could build like an Energy Academy house and stuff like that, but we never really believed that it was possible until we more or less completed the process and became like more famous, and that we started having a trust in this is a really, really nice and good process. So then we built the academy 10 years later, because we had more and more visitors from outside who wanted to come and study and see and learn from our experiences here. So that is again a sign of what you call it, humble attitude to changes here. The community didn't believe it was like worth having like an institution like the Energy Academy. That's too extravagant, and no, that will never be successful. But after 10 years, and we got a lot of awards from the European Union and from UN and from many other places, then we started believing that maybe we are a central place of evolution that could have an institution, we could run it successfully. And now 15 years later, it's up and running, and we have like 3,000-4,000 visitors every year from all over the world. And it has become this iconic meeting place for energy transition from islands. And we meet with people from all over the world. We have high numbers of different nationalities here every year. And we feel very obliged and very responsible for the role we have here also, that we have to share what we learned, because there's so many other interesting aspects, and we learn a lot from them as well. Because I mean, this is an ongoing process for islands, and I really, really like that that very, very extended and strong network.
Correct. We tend to see this in in many of our island communities, that there is this sense of understanding which is deep, and then helping each other and sustaining all the issues, transitions as well that islands and islanders experience. I think it's very famous, the importance of social capital and how this is solid in islands communities, and this can help for sure. In terms of the next steps, so where do you see the next challenges for the Energy Academy, but also for the islands itself to project, the efforts that you have made in the next 10, 20, 50 years?
I think we over 20 years have learned how to work with technology. I mean, wind power, district heating, heat pumps, EVs, charging points. This is now common knowledge, and it's still some places, I mean, expensive, and you have to invest in it. But the technology itself is known now by the world. So we don't have to teach people that anymore. They can do that. So the next phase is climate. So the whole climate impact, our resources, our consumption, how we administrate our resources and our consumption is one of the very, very big issues here. And this is much more complicated than just changing 1 kilowatt hour from fossil fuel to green energy. Now we are looking at people's habits and lifestyles and resource administration and all these sort of things. And I think this is going to be a very complicated process. We need to help each other very, very much here globally, because I mean we use a lot in the Western world, and Samsø is one part of the Western world. We import a lot of stuff from China and sometimes from Africa and other places here also, and we put a lot of carbon emission onto somebody else producing what we use here. So it's a much more complicated process that we are looking into now. And I think this is a learning process where we need to work with universities, academia, we need to work with schools. So the education system will be much more aware of their role in educating the next generation in what to do, how to administrate and how to handle this. It's also about governance. So we need to involve and include politicians in their responsibility to make laws and regulations that will help us do what is necessary to meet the goals here. So it's not enough just to commit to the UN development goals. We also on the ground need to make like a bottom-up approach where we say we appreciate the development goals and this is what we are going to do. So we need to make binding contracts on numbers and results and what we want to do here. And I think that the Energy Academy is a nice place to do that, because we don't have a financial interest in this. We are a non-profit organization. We can actually meet with people without strategic, battles about who is going to have the business, but more like what are we going to do and include and involve people in their anxiety and fear for the future, because this is what we feel more and more. People can see it now, they can feel it, and they come to us frustrated and say, what do we do about it? And we need to act and do things here. So I think that is the next thing we need to do, look into people's daily life and try to make change there and help people in that process.
Fantastic. So on this note, I would like to wrap up our session and thank Søren Hermansen, the director of the Samsø Energy Academy, for sharing your story, for also giving us some very inspiring messages on how, from a vision born probably out of few people, probably over a good plate of something, or thinking about it with friends, it is translated into something that has changed, the life and the trajectory of the islands itself, by also providing a sustainable future and setting an example for many other islands. So thank you so much for sharing this. Also, thank you to Island Innovation to have asked me to share this and to have identified this story as part of the program. Kata, back to you.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you, Søren, for sharing the inspiring story. I'm sure a lot of the people will learn about it. And thank you, Stefano, for the great moderation. Before we close, I'd like to announce that Island Innovation is planning a Global Sustainable Island Summit next year in May 2024. It will be co-hosted by the government of Prince Edward Island in Canada. We will be gathering professionals, researchers, policymakers, and industry leaders to discuss and explore innovative solutions and advancement in sustainable energy. You have the possibility during the Virtual Island Summit to buy your early bird ticket. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, and have a nice day. Bye.